welcome to a video for DGST 101 Intro to Digital Studies, a class at the University of Mary Washington. I am Zach Whalen, the professor for this class in the summer of 2021, and I am pre-recording this video for my students from the guest bedroom at my in-laws house because I'm on vacation. I'm visiting my in-laws for the first time in a couple years, so this is kind of nice. I usually do a live stream with a green screen and everything, but this pre-recorded video should do well enough, I think. I'll be here for a few days, so the next couple of videos will also likely be pre-recorded. In today's video, my plan is to give you the big picture, the overview for the week, talk about the major assignment for this week, and also introduce a couple of the activities that I'd like for you, if you're a student in this class, to do Tuesday or so as we get started with some of the main ideas for this week. That's a good enough intro, I think. So just a quick review. In week 1 of this class, you created your domain if you didn't already have one. You posted something on that domain. You reflected on that process. You practiced digital creativity and shared the results of that practice in our Discord community and posted it on your blog, and you reflected on that practice. In week 2, we shifted from digital creativity to digital culture, and we studied how people talk to each other and share information online, and you developed and practiced some skills in discerning good information online, and you helped contribute to bettering the web by creating a fact-checking article that debunks or verifies some claim that's circulating on those platforms. And along the way, we've been thinking about digital culture as this space in which humans interact with each other and create society by communicating in this digital way. In both weeks 1 and 2, what we mean by digital creativity, digital culture, has been largely ephemeral, which means that it's online, it's on the web, it's ones and zeros or bits and bytes or electrons zipping around on networks, and it's information, and it's organizing that information and doing different things with that information. But that information has been characterized by it being essentially digital, virtual, ephemeral information. This week, we're going to continue looking at digital culture, but we're going to take a big shift here because digital culture isn't just that ephemeral stuff, it's all of the material stuff that is involved in making it possible for us to access and use that ephemeral stuff. All that material stuff comes from somewhere, it was made by someone, and it will end up being somewhere and being used by or discarded by or recycled by someone in the future. So human involvement is present at every step in the life cycle of a physical digital object. So this week, your main assignment is going to involve you getting to know a specific digital object in some way, and I'm going to show you an example. So this is a Guitar Hero controller. You can see it right here. This is my brother-in-law's, so thanks, Scott, for letting me use this as an example for today's lecture and for the rest of this week. Students, what you're going to be doing is getting to know a specific digital object, possibly like this one, or maybe something a little bit more advanced or complicated, and your job is going to be to get to know that physical digital object in terms of where it came from and potentially maybe where it's going. So this week we're going to be looking at the supply chain around electronic devices and trying to understand the human involvement at each of those stages in the life cycle of a physical digital object. Now, I don't want to belabor this point, but I think it might be helpful to pause a little bit on this concept of ephemeral versus material. When we talk about things being ephemeral, that basically means that they are disposable, they're volatile, they're temporary, they're contingent. They're things that depend on other things being there, and we basically think of these as temporary unless we take special effort to make sure that they're there. Whereas when things are physical or material, we tend to think of them as having some permanence or some durability or some sense in which we can hold it in our hands or do something with it. In terms of the internet, in terms of digital technology, most of the time we're dealing with things in an ephemeral kind of fluid space. We're thinking about things moving around on our desktop, we're thinking about things streaming to us through our different digital devices. Somebody's shooting off fireworks right now at 3 in the afternoon. And the thing is that we tend to only focus on or think about the material or physical aspects of our digital technology when it breaks or when it's annoying or when something's wrong with it. But these things are still there and they've always been there. And it's important if we're thinking about digital culture to take both things together because the physical aspects of digital media have a human history as well. They were made by someone somewhere and they will continue to be part of this planet, or the materials in them will continue to be part of this planet going forward, whatever ends up happening to them. So it's important for us to understand that there are at least 3 stages in the life cycle of an electronic device, probably 4 stages, but let's go with 3. There's the first stage, which is the manufacturing. Second stage is the use, like when you have it, like I'm using this laptop right now. And then a third stage is the afterlife, or what happens after you're done with it. And lots of different things can happen at all 3 of those stages. But in this class, or in this week of this class, you're going to be focusing on and learning about mainly one of those 3 stages for some object of your choosing. And that's the big picture for the week. Next, I'm going to go over each day of this week, the basic plan for those days, and then go into some more detail about the specific plans for today, which is Tuesday, or day 1 of week 3 of this class. Here's an overview of all of the days of this week, all 4 days, starting with today, Tuesday, July 5th. Today you're going to learn about the life cycle of smartphones by playing a video game called Phone Story. It's a short game, but it requires a bit of explanation to show you how to do it. You'll also learn about coltan mining by reading an article called Your Phone Was Made by Slaves. Coltan is a mineral that is probably inside of your phone right now or in many other electronic devices, and it's important to learn about what it is and where it comes from. And we'll talk about those things in both Discord and something called Perusal, which is a new platform for this class. I'll talk about that shortly. On day 2, which is Wednesday, you'll learn about labor practices and some allegations of abuse at some of Apple's suppliers and the factories. On day 3, we will learn about e-waste and what happens in the afterlife of these digital objects after we're done with them. And then on Friday, basically, you'll complete the object lesson. This week, it's just the object lesson. There is no other module or kind of on your own assignment this week. It's just the one big thing, the object lesson. And that's the overview for the week. In that overview, you might have noticed there are 2 new things that we're adding to our digital toolkit this week, Perusal and Timeline.js. Perusal is meant to be a collaborative annotation and social learning platform. It's built into Canvas, and it does take a little bit of getting used to, but overall I find it a pretty interesting way to interact with an assigned reading. And Timeline.js is a web-based interactive timeline tool. It's built into a Google Sheets backend. You can embed it in a blog, which I will ask you to do for your object lesson assignment this week. And in this case, you're going to be using Timeline.js to tell the story of the device that you are investigating. So as I just said, your 2 main goals for today are to play that video game called Phone Story and to read an article and respond to it. First, let me explain Phone Story and show you how to play it. Phone Story is a short video game created by a studio called Molly Industria. You can learn more about them, by the way, by going to their website, mollyindustria.org. They're a studio that make, controversial political video games, pretty interesting stuff. In this case, we're going to be playing this game called Phone Story, and there are a couple of challenges to getting it to work. As you see here, you can download it as an app on an Android device. There is not a version for the Apple Store, as you see here. And it also has the ability to be played online. However, the problem with playing it online is that it requires Flash to play in the web browser, and Flash no longer works in web browsers, so you can't do it that way. There are, however, a couple of versions you can download, a Mac version and a PC version. Both of those are standalone applications that should work fine out of the box. Unfortunately, I don't know of a way to play this if you have a Chromebook and that's your only computer. So if you find yourself in that situation, unfortunately, you'll just have to skip this and rely on other people's explanations of how to play it, and that should be good enough, I hope. Once you've installed Phone Story and got it running, this is what it should look like. I'm going to play the first little bit here, but since the audio for the game will kick in and you won't be able to hear me talking over it probably, I'll just say a few words about it and show you how to play it. This is meant to be for a touchscreen device, and so as you see, as I move my cursor over here, that's simulating where my finger would be on a touchscreen device. If you do have the ability to play it on your phone, I think it does. It maybe is a little bit more compelling that way. You'll see the graphics are kind of cartoony. The gameplay is relatively simple, but surprisingly challenging on at least one of the levels. And your goal is to basically move forward. If you play it on story mode, the game will start by narrating to you and kind of explain what you're supposed to be taking away from the different levels. And it's meant to be the phone that you're holding talking to you, telling you its story, but of course you can interpret it however you like. I'll just play through the first level and show you what happens.
Hello, consumer. Thank you for joining us. Let me tell you the story of this phone while I provide you with quality entertainment. Once upon a time, there were minerals resting in the bowels of the earth. One of these minerals, called coltan, is found in most electronic devices. The majority of coltan's world supply is located in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, a country torn by a brutal civil war. The increasing demand of coltan produced a wave of violence and massacres in the Congo. Military groups enslaved prisoners of war, often children, to mine the precious material. Directly or not, we are all involved in this complex, illegal traffic. You didn't meet the goal. Don't pretend you are not complicit.
So what you saw me doing there, I was moving the pointer around the screen and basically choosing different workers to threaten. When I saw one that was tired, I would click on it, and then the soldier would move closer to it and threaten that worker with or that slave with a gun, and then they would keep working. The goal for that level is to make sure you mine enough coltan, and the amount of coltan, or your I guess motivation of your workers, is measured in the yellow bar that moves across the bottom of the screen. And then your goal is that red line, and so you're trying to keep the yellow bar ahead of the red line. And if you fail to, like I did just now in the demo, it will give you that message saying, don't pretend you're not complicit, and offer you a chance to try again. So that's Phone Story. There are 3 more levels after this. As you can see from this first level, the tone is pretty jarring. It's got a kind of friendly, cartoony voice and background music, and even the graphics are fairly, cartoony. You might say like 8-bit kind of video game retro graphics, and yet the subject matter is really disturbing. And so that's something that you should be prepared for in this game. It is really disturbing. And one content warning about it, level 2 deals with suicide. And so if that's something that you have a hard time with or that you don't want to deal with, that is something you might want to skip over. So it's a tough game, it's an interesting game, it's a challenging game. And in Discord, I'd like to hear your thoughts about what it was like to play it. How did you choose to approach some of the levels? What was the hardest level just in terms of mechanics to play? What was the hardest level emotionally to play? And ultimately, what can we learn from this game? It's meant to be a teaching tool or a rhetorical tool or even an argumentative kind of tool. So do you take its argument? Are you convinced by it? Do you have further questions about it or some of the things that it brings up? If so, talk about those things in Discord. Perusal is separate from Canvas, but it's integrated with our Canvas course, and you can find it over here on the left in the course navigation. I'm logged in as a student right now, so I can't click on that link, but that's what you would do to access it. Just click on that link called Perusal. Now I can't show you this process, but one kind of awkward thing that happens the first time you click that Perusal link is that you'll be prompted to create a Perusal account and then link it to your Canvas account. That's all pretty much automatic. It just goes back and forth a couple of times, so don't worry about that. I'll show you what you should see once you eventually are all the way into our Perusal homepage for the class. This is the Perusal homepage for this class, or rather it's the assignments homepage for the class. This is my faculty view of it, and it does look a bit more robust than your view, but what you're looking for basically is this assignments tab. You should see something along these lines here. And you can also access it with this left menu that pops out. You're looking for assignments, and I've assigned this to be due on July 6th, but just like anything in the class, that due date is really just meant to be, this is the date you should do it, but if you do it later, then do this before you do things that are assigned later. And what you do with this is you can click on the assignment, and as you see here, I've provided a few instructions, and I'm basically asking you to read this article. It's an excerpt from a book, and it's a fairly lengthy excerpt, but I think by using the tools in Perusal, you'll make it a bit more, a bit easier to navigate. So opening the document looks like this. And once you're in the document, this is a screen capture. This is captured from a web page, but it's all captured here in Perusal. You can scroll down to read the article. You can see my instructions here that I've popped in this little pop-up, and then you can exit out of that. And the idea is that you can highlight any part of this, and then on the right, you'll get this opportunity to enter some kind of comment. And what I'd like for you to do is comment on anything you find interesting, or ask a question if you find something confusing. Also, I've created several questions in here already, and you can find those if you click on this conversations icon on the right. And you can see that these are questions. They lead with this like question mark icon, and these are things I've written as possible starting points for conversations. You're welcome to reply to one or all of those, or none of them if you have other things to talk about. But these are just meant to be kind of starting points. In terms of your view of the document, you have a few different options here than I do, but you can, if you'd like to, you can highlight it so that, or select this option so only my comments are visible if you get distracted by other people's comments, or you can look at no comments. You can turn off everyone's comments if you find that distracting. But this is meant to be social annotation, so it is possible to see each other's comments. I mean, it is, I think, helpful sometimes to see each other's comments. How do I get this back? Oh yeah, so all comments. And one thing you should know about this, by the way, I've got it set to be anonymous, so that means that I will know who you are, but you won't know who each other are, if that makes sense. So when you reply to this, you'll be replying anonymously, and just like that. And similarly, if you see someone else's annotation on here, it will be anonymous, and your reply to them will be anonymous. Just having used this platform over the last year in my classes, several students said they really appreciated the opportunity to leave comments anonymously because they felt self-conscious about their comments and they didn't want to have to, defend certain ideas. I think that's a useful thing, so that's why I've said it that way. So that's perusal. Please try to leave at least 7 annotations somewhere on this document as you read it. So that was phone story and perusal. Finally, let me take you through the steps of the assignment, the object lesson, which is your big project for this week. And I'd just like to go through it a little bit. Obviously, I've written things out in what I hope is a pretty clear manner, but some of these things might benefit from a little bit of context. Big picture-wise, what we're doing here really is a kind of archaeology. So I provide a little bit of background about what archaeology is, but basically we're taking a specific object, which is the object you choose here, and trying to learn everything we can about the culture that produced and used that object. So it might help to imagine yourself as an archaeologist from the far future trying to investigate the far past, which would include our present and our past. But you don't have to go that far into the fictional scenario if you don't want to. But basically, here's the idea. You're going to choose an object to talk about, and it's important to note that we're talking about a specific object here. So not the idea of an iPhone or the Game Boy as an invention, but a specific product, a specific object. My Guitar Hero controller in this case, not the idea of a Guitar Hero controller in general, but the idea of this specific one that belongs to my brother-in-law. And you can choose lots of different things here. If you are not sure where to start, look for media technology, something that records sound or images. Old game controllers are good, old handheld games are good. The big thing to avoid is do not attempt to take apart or learn about the insides of anything that has a CRT style monitor, than one of those big deep monitors like that. Those can be very dangerous. They can actually be fatal. The amount of electricity stored in those is enough to really, really injure you. So don't mess with those. But anything else just about is good. If you have any questions about a particular object you're interested in and you're not sure if it'll work, then feel free to let me know. The older the better, the more complicated the better. So there's kind of a sweet spot that I can advise you about. And then you're going to choose one of these 3 stories. I think there are 3 stories you can learn about for these objects: the prehistory, the lived history, or the afterlife. And you should probably find out a little bit about all 3 of those phases of its life, but you're going to choose one to really investigate, and I'll talk about that next. So in step 3, you'll do that investigation. Of these 3 options, I think the prehistory is the most interesting. It can also be the most challenging, so I don't know, I hope some of you choose it. It's really a lot of fun. The idea is you take your thing apart and then you try to figure out where the different parts were made. You will probably see somewhere on the outside that it says made in, for example, Malaysia. This Guitar Hero controller says made in China, but we're trying to get more specific than that. So we're trying to find out where in China was this made? When was it made? And when we say when, I don't mean what year, but I mean what date was it made on? And we can often find those things out if we know how to look at certain things and understand the information that we see on them. Also, many of these things, the more complex they are, will likely have different components that come from other locations, and similarly we can find out when and where those other components were made, and learn a lot about the history of this object through those kinds of things. So that's I think the most interesting option, and I really hope some of you choose that. The second option is the lived history, and this is more or less your history with this object. I don't have a history with this particular Guitar Hero controller, so I'm going to have to, I guess, interview my brother-in-law and figure out what his history is with this in case I want to do this option with it. But again, you're going to try to figure out specific events in the life of this object. When you bought it, when you first started using it, when you stopped using it, if it's something that you haven't used for a while. And this is an especially interesting object if you can find an object that doesn't belong to you primarily, but maybe your parents or a sibling or somebody, because then you can kind of interview that person and learn about a device's history outside of your own, I guess, proximity to it, and I think that's useful. And then finally, option 3, Afterlife, is often hard, but it's not hard in terms of investigation. It's more hard in terms of speculation, because you have to kind of write something, I guess, as a kind of science fiction or speculative fiction. Basically, you're going to predict what's going to happen to this device. Let's say you recycle it. What happens after something is recycled, or after you put it in the box? Who takes it, and where do they take it, and what do they do with it, and what happens to those different components? Different electronic devices have different materials in them, and each of those materials has its own specific purposes and afterlives and time before it biodegrades, and those are things that you can find out. And so if you choose this option, you should research those things and figure out what's going to happen to your thing. So again, choose one of these options, not all three, but choose either the prehistory, the lived history, or the afterlife, and investigate and figure out however much you can. In a lot of cases, I'm calling this investigation as opposed to research, because you're not just going to be able to Google this. You're going to have to really dig into some things to figure out, to find some answers to the questions that are being raised here. Finally, whatever you find, I'd like for you to assemble it in an interactive timeline using a product called Timeline.js. I'm not going to go into detail on Timeline.js right now, but I'll just show you the web page. This is what it looks like, and here on the web page you can see an example of a timeline created with Timeline.js. This is a timeline of the history of women in computing, and you can click through it. You're going to create something like this, but telling the story of your object as opposed to, as they're doing here, telling the story of women in computing. So that is an overview of the assignment. This is all due on Friday, and what you should complete is the timeline, of course. The timeline should have at least 10 events or entries on it, and that includes some reference to each of the 3 phases as you see explained here. And you should embed or link that timeline in a blog post, and in that post reflect on your work and the things that you did. I'll have a few more things to say about this aspect of the assignment once I give the complete demo of how to work with Timeline.js. So that's it for my intro to week 3 and my instructions for day 1 of week 3. I hope that was helpful, and I hope the things that you read and learn about this week will be interesting and challenging and ultimately compelling, because I think these are important things to know. Again, just a quick overview and to recap. In weeks 1 and 2, we focused on things that were important to digital culture, but essentially ephemeral and contingent and electronic. In week 3, we're taking a look at the physical or material aspects of digital culture and trying to understand where those come from and the aspects of human culture that are necessary to create those things and make them possible, and also the impacts of those things on human culture and our ability to occupy this planet for the next millennia or however long these devices continue to exist in some form on this earth while they biodegrade. So that's our plan for this week. If you have any questions, and I assume you do, I'm sure you do, I will be online. If you see me online in Discord, you're welcome to chat me up there or send me an email. If you'd like to have a video conference to talk about things, that would be great. Or if you just see me online in the Discord voice channel, then feel free to just jump in and say hello. I won't be doing regular office hours this week because I'm traveling and kind of doing family stuff, but I will be online pretty frequently throughout the week. So please reach out if you have any questions. And yeah, good luck getting started, and I will see you online.